The purpose of this cognitivist design presentation is to show an application of cognitivist principles in the design and development of a tabletop card game that promotes mindfulness techniques and social emotional learning. The product is a card game for K through 16 students that addresses anxiety in students using mindfulness techniques. The learning sequence is achieved through cognitivist principles that engage the target user when the game is played. Social emotional learning can be summarized as a growth mindset where students can learn behaviors that encourage personal growth. In this case, through a tabletop game, the player engages in mindfulness techniques and socializes with peers to better understand emotional growth, such as tools for anxiety. Cognitivist principles are helpful for understanding how to design a tabletop card game that can promote mindfulness techniques. This game is called the Anti-Anxiety Card Game, which aims to reduce anxiety by creating an accessible pathway for mindfulness techniques in a social gameplay situation. The idea is to promote short-term and long-term social emotional growth. This presentation looks at the design of a card game using a cognitivist lens as a learning theory. The layout of the card game, the sequence of events, and the sensory memory of the player are all key parts of the game. There is active participation, and with the theory of Dale's cone of experience, we know that gameplay with rehearsal can inform learning. Using Dale's cone of experience, we can better understand how the player learns from different instructional design technologies in a progression, and active participation in the game enables players to have a memorable sensory experience with high engagement. Using cognitive principles can reduce cognitive load and allow for effective learning and processing, which helps greatly in the goal for creating long-term social emotional skills. Students can process information with manageable chunks, and sensory memory is a key part of this tabletop game to promote short-term and long-term social emotional practices. Driscoll explains the process and flow of information when the player learns. After working memory, where there is rehearsal and chunking, the information is coded conceptually, or it takes on meaning, and encoded into long-term memory from which information is later cued. An effective way for instruction in the anti-anxiety card game is to make sure that the player's prior knowledge is considered. Using cognitive information processing, this will help the player construct cognitive connections between what they already know and what they are being asked to learn. The context of psychology and cognitivist theories within game design is that game design can be used as an educational tool and can impact intrinsic motivation by the way we process the game. Statiano states that games, for health designers, provide motivation if it satisfies the player's basic psychological needs. Cognitive information processing is analogous to a computer where the human brain processes and uses information. Attention is therefore important because we can only process a set amount of information. This game considers memory stages. The game is played as a matching game with an array of face-down cards where two players take turns flipping them right side up until they get a color match. First, the players go through sensory memory on seeing the cards and interacting in an auditory way with the other player to establish rules. Then, through attention and pattern recognition, the player stores information to working memory. Next, upon matching a set of cards, the player has to read the card and choose a mindfulness technique to complete on the spot, such as deep breathing or closing their eyes. These are experiences with active participation, and they tie into Dale's cone of experience, where the form of experience informs the amount of learning that can take place. On playing the game multiple times and rehearsing the mindfulness skills, the information is encoded into long-term memory. The player can then retrieve the skills from long-term memory. Game design can be informed by elements from cognitive information processing. Celia Hodent, a psychologist and former director of user experience design at Epic Games, cites that perception, memory, attention, motivation, and emotion are all key elements of game design. Gestalt theory focuses on organizing information as humans process them in grouped and organized ways. For the visual design of the anti-anxiety card game, the principles of proximity, similarity, closure, and simplicity are used. The visual elements for each card are standardized, with colors on top and a description on the bottom. This allows the player to recognize the pattern of playing cards or Pokemon cards with this top-down visual hierarchy. A main image fills up the upper portion of the card, with action items and text below it. Grouping text allows the player to process information in chunks. This reduces cognitive load, and players can store the information quickly in their attention and working memory. Gestalt theory of proximity and closure is used to group together the cards in an array with similar colors. The face-down cards with the gray color scheme, promote pattern recognition, which allow the player to understand the program of the game. Cards are face down and must be flipped to reveal the other side, as in a matching game. The pattern recognition allows the players to pull from memory and help with processing. In conclusion, the learning sequence from cognitive information processing is crucial for instructing players and designing an anti-anxiety tabletop card game. We can effectively design gameplay that promotes instruction. We can use cognitive tools to make an experience that considers sensory information processing, Gestalt and visual design principles for chunking of information and perception, to create a memorable and effective instructional design in media such as tabletop card games.